So I'm Liz Jones with the Jones Realty Group, and today with me is Jason Lund. And Jason and I have had the pleasure of meeting each other before in the past, and we were introduced, I believe, by Matt Vincent, who is an in-town attorney. And I came to know you, and through a couple of different visits, have learned the depth of the financial wizardry and management that you happen to master. So I would love to take a few seconds and read a bio intro that you sent me. And we have Tom coming online. So, so I have understood that you are in financial management versus money management. And for the last 30 years, you have been helping people in the process of finding their way through financial and creating pathways through unique needs, which you pointed out, can change daily. You possess a goal of guidance and oversight so that their lives can be made better through the process and pathway. It's an order, as you put it. And you wake up energized each morning, ready to make a difference in their lives. And you are best known for coaching and providing motivation based on cultural processes and personal order as individuals. You teach, but also recognize the value of learning. Thank you, Jason, for being here this morning with us. We really appreciate it. Good morning, Tom. How are you?
Good morning. That took a while for that to open.
No worries, no worries. So we have just introduced Jason and read his bio. So I was just about to give him an opportunity to talk this morning.
You know, Liz, I believe that it initiates from a standpoint of as follows. The majority of people are seeking guidance. They're looking for oversight. We all do. Nobody can really be a jack of all trades anymore. So what you have to do is, on an empathetic basis, understand that people are seeking the guidance and people are looking to be led properly, but no one wants to be told what to do because the culture we live in creates an aura of independence around us. So it's a very thin line in providing instructions or, as you might say, shepherding and focusing so people see what is necessary. That creates a more congenial atmosphere when recommendations are made, because it's perhaps easier for someone to follow them. It's a different attribute perhaps than a physician or an attorney, because it's all about people's money. And I try to focus on an understanding of the culture, a touch of human psychology, but how people perceive things. Because when your perception is appropriate, you tend to lose fear and you seek guidance. And improper perception tends to encapsulate you in fear. And what happens with that is people always have three objective opportunities. One is you do the right thing. The second is you do the wrong thing. Both can have equally positive outcomes long-term because we learn in those manners. Number three is you don't do anything, and that can be literally disastrous. And the culture we deal with around us is forcing people into that aspect of thought because there's too much information, too many sources, actually knows where to turn anymore.
That's true. I've seen that even in my industry. The more choices people have, the more crippled they are to make a decision. That's true. So wonderful. Well, tell me a little bit more about the cultural processes. You mentioned that, and I found that comment very unique. Cultural processes and personal order. Define that for us.
Well, let's do it in reverse. What I call personal order is what people are seeking to leave the peripheral fear they have behind these things. Okay. The majority of people have a cadence, a process as they step through life, as they step through their day, usually an organizational process from first in the morning to last in the evening. And what they're doing is, in the course of this, they're flowing through a societal culture that in many aspects where they are trying to basic information, guidance, and related is culturally outdated. I believe, for example, cultural practices of my industry are to a great degree outdated. They're not keeping up with the modernity of what we call American society and culture. To some degree, they're trapped in the 80s, the 90s, even the 2000s, and things have changed dramatically over that period of time. And yet the process is inherent for the majority of people in the world of finance, banking, investing, etc., have remained almost the same. And I don't think it's doing the public as much good as it otherwise could be. And we have the cultural process where we tend to almost automatically misunderstand what a client is asking or seeking because we still aren't tuned into the nonverbal cues. It takes a long time to understand that. We also have, again, what I call the personal order, where people are seeking a guidance and an oversight. And my favorite people to work with are professionals near the peak of their own profession, because what they're seeking is guidance and oversight in what I do. And I would certainly, if they are a top-notch writer or they are a surgeon or an engineer, if I needed their services, I would seek specifically what they do. But I don't believe I could ever for a moment do that. And that's the mindset they have when it comes to the order of things. And they make, I believe, the best people to work with. They're seeking a solution. They're trying to restore order, because restoration of order is something we all seek. And they trust to do it on an ongoing basis.
You know, that's an interesting point. And I think that when I look back about the clients that I've best worked with, there are the two categories but I would take that one step differently from my perspective. So a new homeowner, a brand new homeowner, is just a sponge. They want to take in that information. They do trust your advice. So from my perspective, it's almost the opposite, but I can clearly see how in financial management, it would be a complete opposite. You're correct. I would not try to tell you how to run your business. I might have some suggestions of what I heard, but I would definitely not impose that on a professional like yourself. That's great. Wonderful. Tell me a little bit about the process of how you help them find their way through the financial matters.
Well, a long time ago, I realized that asset management was sometimes a microcosmic, in proportion to the whole, portion of financial management. And I made a decision that it was the financial management I was focusing on. And by that, I'm not talking accounting or bookkeeping, but the transient process, what I call the next step process. As people head through life, initiation through end of days, with all things that might have a dollar sign attached to them. Because if we view in a totality, the aspects of things that have a dollar sign attached to them, income, taxation, those are the two big ones people think about. Investment's a big one. But all of it, and we resolve that we will, on the basis of the life expectancy of this person and likely their offspring also, you get a different tactical mindset. Your diligence requires you're always looking forward on the what can or what if to prepare for it. Because I was taught when I was very young that chance favors those who are prepared. And my job is to ensure I have created the best preparation possible on a financial basis for anyone I am charged with assisting. And that, whether or not they are sitting in front of me once for an hour or two, because I want to just have a discussion, or they've been a client of mine for 30 years, my obligation is to process in that manner and provide to them my outlook, stretching as far forward as possible, taking contingencies and everything else into effect. And it's easy to say, gosh, it's complex to do and requires a lot of tactical motion and a knowledge. You need to make sure you're asking all the questions all the time. Then we fall back on that process of understanding nonverbal, which is very important also, especially if you work with a couple and prospectively the children, because most of our communication tends to be nonverbal, and you have, because it allows you to, one aspect, keep the peace, and in another aspect, gain a greater knowledge of what is necessary. And I think that's in a rather a nutshell, really what that might, quote, look like.
One last question, then I want to open us up for questions. So would you mind providing an example of maybe it could be a fictitious client or it could be a real client scenario, someone that you've worked with over time? Because obviously there's stages of life change, whether or not you're having a baby, whether or not it's you've lost a spouse, whether or not, you know, uh, you know how life changes. Can you give an example of someone that through the years you might have helped through different processes, life changing?
Yes, I've had some clients for almost my entire career. Well, I take great pride in that they stayed with me because I kept doing the right thing.
Okay.
I'll take an example, Mrs. A and Mr. B. I met them when I first came into this particular industry, and everything is to some degree realized, so it's acceptable to call it that. And it was almost 30 years ago. And he was an engineer, was working for a firm. She was not working at the time. Their son was, let me think, 6 years old. We got to know each other, and initially this relationship began because they needed a remedy to a situation, and I found it for them. And I wasn't necessarily looking for a client. I started out at Prudential. They had been assigned as clients, and they had a situation I was able to remedy soundly and quickly when it came up. And because of that, we developed a further relationship, and over a period of 3 or 4 years, I began to become their investment representative, and I became, again, their wealth management consultant or advisor. So as they progressed, as he chose, for example, to his own firm, I gave some insight there on how to do it. As she chose to then take employment because her son was old enough that it was something she felt she wanted to do, she needed to be herself, and began that, I was a sounding board. As things progressed, where illness struck the family, and she's a cancer survivor. And as in the periphery of the family, the older generation began to pass on, and I would give some advice as they were discussing it with their elders, what they might want to do for the trusts and related, and communicate with the attorneys, just as a sounding board, that's all. Never wanting to interfere, to the point where we start when they were 36 and now they're 66. And because they listen to me, one of the attributes they have is I've always had a dislike of taxation. And I've always understood that a lot of the times, if you can pay tax on the seeds you plant and harvest yon fruit without paying tax, you may be better in the future. So they were always willing to listen, and the series of CPAs they had. Pay a little more tax every year. Be in the position now, they're each 66, and they can really make a decision, are we going to pay tax this year or not? And I mean, one of my happiest propositions is they don't actually need for pension or their Social Security. They save well enough. They have enough tax management involved in the planning. They're going to take it because, of course, it's theirs. But it's interesting how they came to this point, and it took me 4 years to get them to retire. They didn't want to believe they could retire because they never saw the totality, because there they were in the progression, step by step, in a chain of events leading to this. And I'm having to explain again and again and again, here's what you're worth, and you really can. Then I realized it came down to a particular stumbling block. If they're both retired, they're going to be at the same table and under the same roof 24/7. And I picked up on the nonverbal, and then I came back and I told them, why don't you retire first and you'll retire 6 months later? I highly recommend you both find things you like to do. You can donate your time, you can donate your money. You don't have to be feeling like you're trapped in a cage. Now, as soon as that came out, they both laughed a bit and admitted that was part of the consensus of opinion they needed to come to. But it is so funny. And since that time, I've seen that again and again where I have to explain, it's okay. One of you can retire first, or even better, if you want to retire, you can still go get a job and work 16 hours a week at Home Depot. They're going to like your skills. You're going to like to see people, and you're going to be away from each other. It's okay. If I was home 24/7, I'm certain my wife would weld me into my office and I could never get out.
That's great.
That's just an example of navigation and processing, recognition of desire, need, implementation, and through a process of next steps that actually terminates, and I mean this literally, with the death of either the advisor or the client. It should never terminate until then if you're doing your job correctly.
Isn't that interesting? That's great. Well, that's wonderful. Well, I think that everyone can see that you're in it for the long haul, that as life progresses, as life changes, you're a resource for each one of your clients, which is wonderful. So thank you. Tom, welcome. Welcome. I'm so sorry we haven't got to you yet. How are you doing, my friend?
Oh, pretty well. Just plugging away at some of the ongoing projects, and potentially might have another new client, another restaurant. So gave him my quote yesterday. We'll see if he decides to nibble. And I'm also working on Wine Ranch's second website, for their membership. So have to wait, unfortunately, for the third-party vendor, the membership part of it resides, because they have to do things on their side. But once that's there, then we just tie the two together, and Doug and Debbie should be happy again.
Good for you. Jason, I don't know if you know Tom Grimes. Tom builds websites for a living. He is part of several.
Web development, web services in general. It can be SEO. My latest product that I'm going to be pushing real hard through the chamber is the ADA compliance tool, so that you can get a little wheelchair to show up on your website that they can click on and pick their disability tool of choice. There's just a setup fee, and then after that it's free, for them for the basic tool. If they want the more advanced, where they have the $1 million guarantee from the platform and automatic remediation, then it depends on how big the website is, and I can sit with them, do a consultation. All I need is access to the back end of the website to put it in your code, and then it talks to their servers. So it's a lot easier than trying to do it yourself by hand.
So Tom and I,
so important.
Tom and I were talking last week on one of the other Coffee Connections, and one of the discoveries that he provided is that he's seen clients get sued for their website not being ADA compliant, being able to talk to them. So that's a wave of the future where he's learning to adapt in these times too and evolve, which we were just talking about how in these times we're all finding that our industries are slightly changing. And we're all about the same age here, and hats off to our generation who has really bridged two different age groups. My children are much more adaptable than I am, and I found it a little tougher, but at the same time, I'm pretty proud of what we have. Who would have thought that my generation would be interview processes on Zoom or Facebook or Facebook Live? It is just something that is not of our generation. We didn't grow up with a camera stuck in our face the whole time and taking pictures of selfies. It just wasn't our gig. So I am very pleased about how we've evolved. And I sense that will allow us to work deeper into our years. I worry, and maybe you gentlemen can attest to this, I worry about age range, the 60 to 75 range, being more credible to a younger generation. Years ago, you saw wisdom when you looked at someone who was older. Today, I'm not sure their generation sees the same thing as we do.
I have a story from, it's been probably 20 or so years since this happened, but when I was first getting into the computer industry, my son's friend, this is right after the oldest one had just graduated high school. His friend was working at a PC store called PC Club, which is now defunct, but it's where we used to all go and buy our motherboards, our memory, our hard drives, all the parts we needed to build our own PC. And he had built himself this whiz-bang top-end, computer, and he couldn't get Windows XP, which was new then, to install correctly on it. And I suggested, well, have you checked the HCL, which stands for Hardware Compatibility List? And he goes, I hadn't thought about that, so, I just said it in passing. The next time that I went over for a visit, he thanked me because he said that's what the problem was. It was not on the list yet, and there needed to be some changes in the software to accommodate it and some extra drivers. So my son, he just looked totally stunned that I knew all this. And my son I asked him, why was that a thing? And he said, well, you don't get it, Dad. Your generation is not supposed to know these things. That's our thing. It's computers. I go, who do you think invented computers? It was actually my generation and the one before us.
Yeah.
We're the ones who set the base of that pyramid that you're now operating on, So of course I know these things because that's my industry now. So it's kind of ironic. And like you're saying, that little bridge between the generations, they have this perception of, oh, they're old and they don't know this stuff, when we're the ones that probably wrote the code for them.
Interesting. That's a great story. Jason, I saw you about to say something.
Well, I was thinking you have to teach younger people that older people are actually an archive of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Never to brush them off based upon that. You never know where a woman's been or what they've done. And again, it comes back to my father when I was younger telling me this. He would say, son, we just don't put old people on ice floes anymore. Mostly because we will eventually need the knowledge they have retained and maintained for us. And I'm grateful I listened. And I think that's something that has been lacking. I don't know if it's inherent in the educational system or just, again, we fall back on the cultural details where youth believe they know everything, which is why young men will engage in very dangerous endeavors, of course. Mm-hmm. But I prefer to think that way. My clients in their 80s are an archive of knowledge and history I can draw from. And for my son, I want to be the same thing and pass that down. And just a little bit of insinuation of that concept into society, and we would get along much better. There would be less conflict because you are approaching someone from the standpoint of not that I don't know this, which can be an embarrassment, rather, I know you do and I believe you'd like to tell me, which is a more creative method.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I have an interesting question. I do not want to go down a political party route here, but taking this one step further, is a leader of our nation ready in their 70s? Are we beyond ready in our 70s to take on the depth of what we put before them? What is the right age where wisdom and knowledge and experience have met to lead something as large as the United States? Any culture? Opinions, obviously, clearly opinions, and don't go down a political anything.
I think it actually is dependent entirely upon the person.
Exactly, that's what I was going to say.
The course of history has shown us that at 17 going on 18, Lafayette led troops to make this country, to give it its beginnings. We have seen individuals in their 70s who've been able to lead incredibly well. I think it depends upon the person, their own solidity of personality, also, most importantly, their ability to put around them those with an adequate screen of knowledge. They are willing to hear no, they are willing to agree when they may be imperfect, and I think that is the differentiation we're looking for. Age, I believe, has less to do with it than those particular codicils.
Wonderful. And Tom, you had an opinion on this?
Well, same thing. I really feel it depends on the individual. As we're seeing, looking at the ones that are most likely going to be our choices in November, the media aside, one is already in there and kind of proven what he can and can't do. And then the other one, we kind of take tongue in cheek some of the things he says, but both of them have kind of a way of wording things that they probably shouldn't open their mouths sometimes. So it really depends on the individual, because Trump seems to know he's doing, or at least listens to his economic advisors. We were doing gangbusters before this all brought us down. But he needs to have someone break his fingers when it comes to his Twitter account, and maybe not go in front of the media and just shoot from the hip like he does. He's not Reagan. Reagan usually was well spoken when he went in front of the media. He only had a few gaffes that I can recall back when I was younger, but he did have them. Everybody's going to screw up eventually, so you got to be cautious when you're in front of all those mics and cameras.
I can only imagine how difficult it is to be in front of the public as often as many of our political figures are. So, and you know, from a business perspective and before we wrap up here, we're just approaching the end of our session. It is really important for us as leaders of our local community. I mean, people look to us daily.
Yes.
Jason, we talked about how people look to you for all financial matters, and Tom, for all of the wisdom that you provide, and for me, for my advising. So our audience, all eyes are on us, and all the time.
Well, going back to what Jason said, you know, it's really getting to be more of a niche profession and society. You know, we really need to look to those in their niche, because we can't be jacks of all trades anymore. You know, it's almost impossible in this world. So
absolutely. Any final words?
Maintain positivity, and always reflect on the words that are flowing out. Maybe run them past the filter properly. We don't err as perhaps, as perhaps we hear others do that have great power. And again, it's good to have a filter, and it's good to ensure that what you say has meaning as opposed to just trying to fill airtime.
And that is an art in itself. That is an art in itself. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. Jason Lund, thank you. Tom Grimes, thank you for being part of this Coffee Connection this morning. And I wish you a beautiful stay-home day, productive, and the weather outside is lovely too. So thank you very much for your time being here.
Thank you for putting this on, Liz.
All right, you have a great day.
Bye now.